On June 8, 1940, HMS Glorious, one of Britain's largest and fastest aircraft carriers, and a duo of escorts, Ardent and Acasta, detached from Vice Admiral Lionel Wells' aircraft carrier squadron and set off towards England. At the time, the three-ship British convoy had been taking part in Operation Alphabet, the execution of Allied forces from Norway, occurring simultaneously with the more well-known Dunkirk evacuation. Initially, the rough and gloomy grey Arctic Ocean was a dramatic change for the 1,200 men crowded inside the Glorious's labyrinthine steel interior. Thankfully, they were led by a famous commander, Captain Guy Doyley Hughes, who was even said to be a favourite of Winston Churchill's. By the end of the day, the Royal Navy had suffered one of its most devastating defeats in all the war. The official story caused controversy even during the war. Why was such an important ship left so unprotected? New, darker theories have recently emerged. According to a British Parliament member, quote, HMS Glorious may well have become detached from the greater safety of the convoy because of a serious breakdown in relations among her senior officers. She was an unhappy ship. In World War I, HMS Glorious, a courageous class cruiser, spent the better part of a year hunting for the infamous commerce-raiding German cruiser Admiral Graf Spee in the Indian Ocean. Back then, naval warfare was evolving amidst new technologies that included U-boats, a new kind of submarine that shook the Royal Navy to the core, and the air power potential of aircraft carriers. With these shifting strategies, in the 1920s, Glorious was selected for a substantial reconstruction. After a nearly 6-year-long transformation by removing the ship's aft turret and converting the deck space into a flight deck, she emerged out at the dockyard as a brand new aircraft carrier. As with similar conversions in other navies around the same time, the result, while successful, was awkward-looking. Glorious, whose flight deck did not extend to the bow, retained the classic forecastle of the battlecruiser that once chased one of the most iconic ships in history. Some of her crew members described her as an old flat-top barmaid. The armament aboard Glorious combined 4.5-inch dual-purpose guns and anti-aircraft weaponry. With these gun ports and platforms cantilevered all over, she lacked the clean lines of modern purpose-built Royal Navy carriers like HMS Ark Royal. The new aircraft carrier, HMS Glorious, had a displacement of around 22,700 tons and a length of approximately 786 feet. Once converted, she would participate in one of the most pivotal moments of the early stages of World War II. The German invasion of Norway in April 1940 was a strategic move by Germany to secure control over crucial ports, resources, and access to the North Atlantic, most importantly, to potentially blockade the United Kingdom. As the German forces swiftly moved to capture key Norwegian cities and strategic points, the British and their allies responded with a series of naval and ground operations. On April 24, 1940, HMS Glorious, carrier Ark Royal, and their escorts, Ardent and Acasta, arrived off the coast of Norway. The difficulties in the harsh climate and the threat of German forces constrained her operations. As captain of HMS Glorious, Guy Doyley Hughes led the group. Doyley Hughes' reputation was well known in the Navy. During World War I, as a submariner, he once swam ashore carrying a raft of explosives. Once on land, he blew up a part of the Constantinople-Baghdad Railway, where the Germans wished to establish a port on the Persian Gulf, then swam back to the sub. Between April and June, Glorious and her crew made 5 round trips from Norway to Scapa Flow, providing air cover, transport aircraft, and overall support to British forces. Because of fuel concerns, Navy Command kept her in the battle zone for short periods, usually lasting only a few days. On May 26th, Glorious safely flew off 18 Hawker Hurricanes of the Royal Air Force's 46th Squadron from the carrier to land bases. But during this mission, things came to a head between the captain and his air staff. Glorious was slated to leave Norway in late May or the early days of June with her sister carrier Ark Royal and a large complement of cruisers, destroyers, and transports in convoy back to England. That day, Flight Commander J.B. Heath refused to send his planes in against German shore targets, believing the anti-aircraft guns and Luftwaffe fighters would cut his squadron of slow-flying Gladiator biplanes to pieces. Captain Guy Dorley Hughes became incensed. Not used to being refused, he put Heath off the ship in Scapa Flow. Additionally, he issued an order for a court-martial for cowardice in the face of the enemy. That day, it was clear to all aboard that Dorley Hughes was not someone to trifle with. A few days later, as the situation in Norway grew more favorable to the Germans, all British forces were ordered to withdraw. In Operation Alphabet, the evacuation of Norway began in the north on the night of June 4th, with Glorious arriving off the coast 2 days later to provide support. The converted carrier played a role in transporting aircraft, troops, and supplies to support the Norwegian resistance against the invasion. Following this, Dorley Hughes was granted permission to leave early with minimal support. On June 8, 1940, the aircraft carrier Glorious left for England with only 2 destroyers, HMS Acasta and HMS Ardent, and not the usual 4-destroyer minimum. Her final mission before retreat was to evacuate 10 biplane Gloucester Gladiator fighters of the RAF's 263rd Squadron. In a remarkable feat of seamanship and flying that had never been achieved before, 7 Hawker Hurricanes of 46th Squadron also managed to land on her flight deck. This move was previously thought impossible for high-performance monoplanes unadapted to naval work. Soon, this ship would break another, far more obscure record, one that would shake the Admiralty. Unbeknownst to her, her captain, and her crew, as Glorious transited the Norwegian Sea, 2 German battleships, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, also roamed the area as part of a fleet meant to intercept the British evacuation convoys. The state-of-the-art Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were the complete opposite of Glorious. These 32,000-ton wolves of the sea sported 3 main turrets, with 3 11-inch guns each. At 3:45 p.m., the German battleship spotted Glorious and her escorts when they saw smoke on the horizon. The 2 battleships set a course directly towards the unsuspecting British, advancing at 30 knots. Back inside Glorious, sailing at half the speed of the Germans, she had only 12 of her boilers lit. As this was their 5th voyage in the area, the captain believed the waters they were on to be relatively safe, despite warnings by Norwegian coastal watchers. Additionally, that afternoon, she had no planes in combat air patrol, a lookout in her crow's nest, or radar. When the crew aboard Glorious spotted the German vessels only 20 miles away from them, Captain Dorley Hughes ordered the HMS Ardent to investigate. But as Ardent flashed the unknown vessels for identification, the tiny destroyer was answered by a loud salvo from the German battleship's guns. At 4:20 p.m., now on the run from the German vessels, Glorious called up 5 of her Swordfish planes. As she struggled to gain speed, a crew member made a radio report that they were under attack by enemy vessels. About 32 miles away, the message was received by the cruiser HMS Devonshire, a ship on an ultra-secret mission transporting the Norwegian royal family toward safety. Operating in radio silence, the captain aboard had no choice but to ignore the request for assistance. From a distance of only 14.7 miles away, Glorious was attacked by the German vessel's long-range guns, with the 3rd salvo hitting the flight deck, blowing up 2 aircraft being set up for armament and starting a massive fire. The damage wreaked by these shells was one of the longest confirmed naval shots in history. As shrapnel from the explosion pierced a boiler casing and smoke filled her air intakes, the ship slowed down due to a loss of steam pressure. Amid the chaos, destroyer Ardent bravely ran in front of Glorious while firing at the German ships more than 20 times her size. This move planted a large smokescreen, which blocked the vision of Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Still firing, Ardent then sped through the smokescreen and landed 1 hit. She also launched her torpedoes, forcing the 2 German ships to change course. Just before 5 p.m., a salvo hit right in the middle of the bridge of the Glorious, taking the lives of many command officers, including Captain Dorley Hughes, and severing the communications system. The escorts continued to protect their dwindling carrier with a smokescreen, but after 20 minutes, the protection dissipated, and the Germans began one final rain of shells on the converted aircraft carrier, hitting her in the engine compartment. Still losing speed, HMS Glorious began to list. Exactly an hour after spotting the Kriegsmarine duo, Ardent sank. Meanwhile, the enemy continued to pound their main target until she was on fire from stem to stern. Aboard Scharnhorst, some of the crew members filmed the attack upon Glorious. The footage shows large amounts of water falling around the carrier in the opening moments of the battle, followed by the frenzied defense by the destroyers. Finally, the video captures the listing of the mortally wounded old barmaid, with smoke and flames covering her every inch until she was one with the ocean. As the sole survivor, Acasta attacked the battleships with torpedoes rather than retiring from the fight, successfully blasting one right into Scharnhorst. The damage caused a 30-foot wide hole in her hull. Acasta continued to fight on against both battleships, more than 20 times her size, until she too sank right after 6 p.m. As all 3 Royal Navy ships disappeared from view, the scared and injured survivors went from scorching heat to bitter cold in minutes. With one of them badly damaged, the Germans quickly fled the scene to a repair base in mainland Norway, leaving over 1,000 British survivors to their luck. Back in Britain, the Admiralty remained unaware that the ships were lost, and even continued to radio orders. In fact, the British only received information about the sinking when the Germans announced them on the radio. A day went by before they sent Ark Royal out to the area of the battle, but no survivors were seen. When Norwegian vessels finally found them nearly 3 days later, only 40 men remained alive. The death toll of the June 8, 1940 sinking of Glorious, Acasta, and Ardent, at 1,519 casualties, exceeded any other great British naval disasters of the war. As such, controversy began almost immediately, with many demanding to know how and why such a disaster could have occurred and whose fault it was. Some believe the 3 ships were sacrificed to protect HMS Devonshire and ultimately the Norwegian royal family. The Admiralty has long maintained that Glorious was sent home on her own because her evacuation mission was complete and she was low on fuel. During this fateful journey, according to top brass, she simply ran out of luck. And yet, in 1980, the Navy's official historian, Captain Stephen Roskill, lifted the lid on a controversy about the incident years later in an article published in the Sunday Times titled "The Cantankerous Captain of HMS Glorious." Drawing upon testimony from Captain J.B. Heath, the ship's senior aviator who missed the sinkings due to being left at Scapa Flow when he refused to follow orders, the historian described an unhappy ship run by a tyrannical captain whose legendary acts during World War I allegedly disguised incompetence, bad leadership, and even questionable mental stability. J.B. Heath, interviewed years later, asserted that Captain Doyley Hughes had a total lack of knowledge of air affairs. According to Roskill's article, Glorious was racing home without proper protection and was completely unprepared for combat because Captain Doyley Hughes was hungry for revenge against Heath and hurried to bring forward the court-martial against his former officer. Even more recently, in 2019, Ben Barker, the grandson of the commander of Ardent, suggested that Glorious was dispatched early, as it was needed for Operation Paul. In this top-secret but unexecuted plan, Britain planned to mine the harbors of neutral Sweden so the Germans couldn't export badly needed iron. This operation would have been akin to an attack on a neutral nation, hence the secrecy of the Admiralty. Perhaps it was the court-martial, the fuel, the safekeeping of the royal family, Operation Paul, or a combination of all these that led to the tragic sinking of Glorious, Ardent, and Acasta on the Norwegian Sea. The whole truth of the incident will not be revealed until 2041, as the sinking of HMS Glorious is the only British carrier loss of World War II, for which the records have been sealed for 100 years.